floats through the air with the greatest of ease, the daring young man on the flying trapeze.
Welcome to The Place of Places, a chapter-by-chapter analysis of William Saroyan's 1972 memoir, Places Where I've Done Time. There are 68 chapters in this book, addressing different significant times and places in Saroyan's life. Think of this video series as a sort of companion piece that contextualizes the times and places and gives more information about each. I'm Dory Meyer, archivist at Forever Saroyan, an archive dedicated to the Saroyan family, founded and managed by William's cousin, Charles Janigian, in San Jose, California. And there's Charles with William and the notorious Uncle Aram, who appeared throughout William's stories. A quick biography of William Saroyan. He was born in Fresno, California in 1908 to Armenian immigrants Pakui and Armanok Saroyan. When Armanok died of a burst appendix in 1911, William and his 3 siblings were moved to an orphanage in Oakland while their mother worked in San Francisco. In 1916, the family reunited and moved back to Fresno for 10 years, where many significant events in Saroyan's life took place. In 1926, the family moved to San Francisco, and in 1934, Saroyan became famous for his short story collection, The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze. Incidentally, this title was inspired by the 1934 hit song, Man on the Flying Trapeze, popularized by comedian Walter O'Keefe, and which you heard at the beginning of this video. The original song was written in 1867 about the famous trapeze artist and flying trapeze inventor, Jules Léotard. Anyway, after that, Saroyan lived in New York, Los Angeles, Paris, and briefly in other locales, and remained popular in the public spotlight until the 1950s, after which his star began to fade. Our website, www.foreversaroyan.com, has a more detailed biography, and Wikipedia's is pretty good too. Saroyan was always incorporating the atmosphere of his locations into his stories, so much so that oftentimes the towns end up as important characters in his stories. He wrote dozens of stories where place was integral, including the Central Valley and Fresno in My Name is Aram, the fictional town of Ithaca, which was based on Fresno, in The Human Comedy, Nick's Pacific Street Saloon in The Time of Your Life, the streets of San Francisco in The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze, and countless others. Oftentimes, places were even part of the story titles. Take a look at our extensive bibliography of his plays, novels, memoirs, lyrics, and short stories on our website to see for yourself. Also note that we have included every publishing instance of each story that we could find, so that you can get a feel for what his most popular stories and essays were, and when they first appeared in print, since he so often first published in magazines. In this video series, every time we cover a place, I'll add it to the Saroyan map. You'll notice that most of the stories take place in California. Though he lived in other places in his life, Saroyan was a Californian to the core. 57% of the stories in this book take place somewhere in California, and 24% take place in his hometown of Fresno, the most of any place. When he wrote the book, he was living part-time in a Paris apartment and part-time in a house he purchased in Fresno. He was mostly writing memoirs, and being present in Fresno probably brought back a flood of childhood memories daily. Saroyan famously wrote in many genres, including playwriting, screenwriting, short stories, novels, song lyrics, and memoirs. In the 1960s, he wrote extensively in the memoir genre, reflecting on a life that survived the Spanish flu, World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, and everything else that happened up until he died in 1981, spanning 7 decades. The stories and places span from 1912 to 1969, with a metaphysical jump in chapter 62 to 1908, at the moment when he was born. Though Saroyan was a pacifist and a friend of the working man, in this book he doesn't express an opinion about events happening in the 1960s. This was a time period spent reflecting on the past for him, perhaps to better understand the man he had become. You can see that most of his stories reflect on events that happened in the 1920s and 1930s, a ripe time for hijinks and inspiration in Saroyan's life when he was in his teens and 20s. The book is full of vivid descriptions of life events, which I will guide you through in historical pictures. I'd like to thank Stanford University Libraries for granting us permission to use extensive quotes from the book for this series. Stanford holds the largest Saroyan archives as well as the Saroyan literary copyright. For all images here, I've sourced them from the internet and credited them as best I can. So, grab your copy of Places Where I've Done Time and follow along. And if you don't have a copy already, order one from a local bookseller. The book begins with a handwritten note by William. Places make us. Let's not imagine that once we're here, anything else does. First genes, then places. After that, it's every man for himself, God help us. And good luck to one and all. The fascinating thing, most likely though, is how the same place, a miserable school for instance, with rotten teachers, bores one man into art and drives another into crime. The only 2 arenas we really have. Art making, crime taking. The genes, cries the man who believes inheritance, not environment, does it. But does it, alone? I've never seen poor people in the slums who were not equal to being instantly clean and refined in a mansion with $1 million. And take away the millionaire's money and put him in the slums, and how elegant will he be fighting mice and cockroaches? Yes, all well and good, perhaps you're saying, but doesn't that mean that people make me? Of course, but people are places.